Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hello and welcome to episode 24 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast with me, Rory Lees-Oakes, and with me as ever, my friend in the journey of phenomenology, Mr. Ken Kelly. How are you today, Ken?
From my phenomenological outlook, it's very good. I felt just lighter today. I don't know what it is. I've had some work that's been with me for the last few weeks, and it seems to have passed by, and I feel good. So phenomenologically sound, I guess. How are you doing, Rory?
Your being in the world is sound, which is what phenomenology is, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I'm absolutely fine. Really excited about this week's episode because we're going to be answering so many questions, or at least two questions that's been answered in our very lively Facebook page. And if you want to join us in that very lively Facebook page, just go into Facebook and search for Counselling Tutor, or why not go onto our website, www.counsellingtutor.com. There's two L's. We spell it in the English way. And you'll find that on the right-hand side, there's a little button that says Facebook. Click on that, and it's a closed community. Knock on the door, we'll let you in, and you can join 2,400 other interested souls in the phenomenological journey of counselling and ask you questions. So we've got two really good questions that's come from that today, haven't we, Ken?
We have indeed. And before I just give a brief overview of what you can expect today, if you're wondering what phenomenology is and you want to find out a little bit more about that, then you just need to go to counsellingtutor.com. That's our website. Click on the podcast tab. Go back to episode number 7, where Rory and I go into quite some depth into phenomenology. And you can even hear us sing a bit in that. I'm not going to give too much away, but there's a bit of humming and singing in that episode. So go and have a listen to that one, episode 7. But today's episode, what have we got? Well, as you say, Rory, some great questions that have come in. We're going to be starting off with that old chestnut, as they call it. It's the debate around the modality of practice, and is one modality more effective than another modality? What modality should you be choosing when you go into your level 3? So we're going to be kicking that around a bit. Theory with Rory, we got something really interesting. I remember hearing this lecture from you the first time, Rory. It's about irrational thought, and really interesting in that we all have them, and they can be quite disturbing at times, can't they?
I'm going to be talking a little bit about automatic thoughts that kind of get in the way, and also about what psychologists call irrational thinking. And the first list of irrational thinking was actually written by Albert Ellis, who was the founder of rational emotive behavioural therapy. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about that. And, how maybe in therapies such as CBT and REBT, therapists may challenge people's, irrational thinking.
Love it. Looking forward to that one. In person-centered business, today I'm going to be venturing into the world of websites, but I'm going to be keeping it really simple and low-tech, and just asking the question, do you build it yourself? Because there's so many of these build-it-yourself website platforms out there. Or do you go to an agency? And if you do go to an agency to have a website built, what kind of price might you expect to pay, and what would you say to them? So we're just going to be brushing over websites. But then we are going back to a topic, as you quite rightly said, Rory, from our Facebook page, and it's about being emotionally grounded when you're with the client. What do you do when confronted with personal triggers? An interesting one there. So a really good, varied episode, and we're starting off, of course, speaking about modality.
Yes. Someone in the Facebook page said, will I know which modality that I want to go into when I go into level 4? And it's a really interesting question. And when I started my training in 1999. And at that time, the introduction course only taught person-centered therapy. And one of the things I put on the feedback sheet was I'd like to have learnt about other therapies. And the awarding bodies through the years now insist, a lot of awarding bodies, that you compare and contrast at least 3 different modalities. There's a very good reason for that. It's because it kind of allows students to be able to say, well, I quite fancy that, but I don't want to do that. And it opens the world up, and education should be about that. But I think that teaching music, Ken, and teaching counselling is very much the same. And shall I tell you why?
Oh, please do. Please do.
Here we go. Because when you teach music, what a music teacher does is teach you rhythm first.
Yeah.
So if you've ever done music, you learn how to clap your hands in beat. And I think that when you teach counselling, you need to learn the basics. And the rhythm is being able to listen and attend and use what we call the core conditions of empathy, congruence, and unconditional positive regard. That's the basis of any therapy, and that's the rhythm section. Now, it's possible that as you teach students, it becomes apparent in music that some people are going to be drummers, some people are going to be lead guitarists, some people are going to play the flute, and some people might decide to go into bricklaying because music isn't for them. And it's the same in therapy. And I think to answer that particular question, after level 3, which is usually in the UK at least, a skills-based course where you're developing that rhythm to quite a high level. So you know how to attend and work with clients and use counselling skills, which is different to therapy. Counselling skills is about communication. Therapy is about really finding out about the clients and really working in their frame of reference. I think at that point, a good tutor should be able to look at someone and say, I think that this therapy might not suit you. The therapy that I teach might not suit you. Unless you had a super student, and she'll be listening to this and she'll know who she is, but I won't mention her. Save her blushes. And she was brilliant. And there's no doubt, not a question in my mind, Ken, that she's going to be an absolutely fabulous therapist. But she was not going to be a fabulous person-centered therapist. She was quite clear to me that she was going to be a TA therapist because she got it. And one of the things that I always go back to is a man called John Shlien. He was one of Carl Rogers' students, and he wrote his principles down in a book called his 7 Principles. And one of them is all theory is autobiographical. And I think to be an effective therapist, the theory and the modality of practice has to be meaningful to you. Just like the musician who plays an instrument, it has to be part of you. And I can remember when I started studying, certainly at practice level, we looked at different therapies. And I just fell in love with phenomenology and Roger's ideas, his whole philosophy. And it suited who I was.
Yeah.
It suited me. It fit me like a glove. It was like, yeah, this is it. But I know that some of the people I trained with didn't. And I often kind of wondered if they're on the right course, Ken.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you loud and clear. And I love the analogy, bringing in music and then kind of referencing off that there will be different instruments and I guess different styles. And somebody might like the waltz and somebody else might like the foxtrot. And it's the same instruments, but playing music quite differently.
Yeah.
But then it begs the question, what music is better, swing or the waltz? And that depends on the individual that is, I guess, coming into contact with that. It's a frame of reference judgment call, and it's about what suits you. I really think that. But when you look to the evidence of what therapy is more effective, it tends to always come down to the thing that makes therapy effective is the relationship, not so much the modality. And of course, there are times when the modality is going to be really important. If somebody walks into your therapy room and says, I'm flying overseas in 2 weeks, I'm frightened of flying, and I need to get that sorted before I go, there's going to be a type of therapy that would best suit that. It's going to be CBT, less so person-centered therapy. But when you take it across the research that's been done, as with music, it's enjoyable to different people, and you can enjoy swing as much as you may a waltz. It's the same with therapy. It's about the relationship, isn't it, in that room?
Absolutely. And I think that there's a big push, isn't there? And we're always saying it. I'm perennially saying it when I used to teach. Therapy is the best fit for clients. So to use the music analogy, you're not going to have someone who's looking to, who's a hard rock fanatic, turning up to someone who's going to play the harp.
Yes.
Because they're going to be sitting there thinking, where are the drums? Where's the bass guitar?
Yes.
It's not going to work. And we know that. And this is something that's taught, and it's kind of one of those well-known things in the world of counselling and psychotherapy. What isn't talked about enough is actually what students' preferences are.
Yes.
And I think that later on in my teaching practice, I was always on the lookout for people who literally had a talent for a different instrument. We taught person-centered therapy at the collegiate where I taught. And, we had people who went off to do cognitive behavioral therapy. We had people who went off to be social workers. So they were doing something different again. And I think a tutor really has a responsibility to say to a learner, if quite clearly their interest lies elsewhere, to say, seek it elsewhere.
I agree with you. As learners have different learning styles, some are auditory, some are visual, some are kinesthetic, so we will be drawn to different modalities of therapy, and I agree with you 100%. Really interesting topic, and I guess it's about you listening to this and considering what it is that you're studying. Does that feel a fit for you? Do you have the balance of being able to look at the other modalities? Are they appealing? Is there a road if you did want to go into studying those? And very often, if you get the rhythm right, Rory, I love it. Will now be known as the rhythm. When you have the rhythm right and you graduate maybe as a person-centered therapist, there are CPD courses that you can do where you can go and study cognitive behavioral therapy or TA 101 to really see where those interests may take you, but you got the rhythm in place.
Absolutely, and you might get someone who's a really good drummer, and then decide, do you know what? I wouldn't mind a bit of a dabble on the old bass guitar because the drums and the bass. So they go and do a bit of that. And they could do the drums and the bass, and then you get people who may just be really good at all instruments and just carry on. I'll learn the keyboards. And I think the same thing is in therapy. Some people learn one therapeutic modality, and then they think, I wouldn't mind investigating that. So they go on a course. And they learn how to play the instrument. Yeah. And they learn how the instruments work together. Yes. Because you don't want a band where you've got someone playing one rhythm and someone playing another. It'd be horrible, wouldn't it? Well, and therein, Rory, because that is such a good analogy, therein lies a danger for the client. And that is the difference between being integrative, where the instruments sound good together, and being eclectic, where it's just people playing their own instruments. And you quite rightly said, maybe they go on a course and learn how to play the instrument. The danger is you don't just read a book about it and then start practicing it in your therapy room. You really do need to go and learn how to play the instrument correctly. I love it. It's a great topic. It really, really is. And one that you can continue the debate on our Facebook group with your peers within your learning institution. But it is time to move on to theory with Rory, and a really interesting topic here. Just tell us a little bit about what we can expect. Okay, Ken, I'm going to show you something that you won't be able to see on radio. What's that, Ken?
It looks like an electric toothbrush of some kind.
It looks like an electric. It is an electric. It's my electric toothbrush.
It is an electric
charging in the office.
Yes.
And the reason I show you my electric toothbrush and share that with the listening audience is because I have a bit of a fear of the dentist, and I struggle with it, and I've had some help with it. And my dentist perennially used to say to me, "You're the most. Your tongue," she would say, "your tongue spends its time trying to push my hands out of your mouth." And it got to the point where, quite clearly, I was not helping my dentist, and you should help medical professionals help you. So I went away and had a bit of a think. And as someone who's 58, I had some quite difficult dental work as a child. And of course, we're talking about transfers going back in the past. So I used to have irrational thinking. So what I did was, the last time I had some dental work, I literally had a plan. I rushed home and I videoed myself saying, "Hey, that dental work was great. No pain. It was fantastic. My teeth are okay." And every time I go to the dentist, I play the video, Ken. Of me saying to me, "Hey, Rory, you go to the dentist. Well, this is the last time you went, and it was just fine." And you know what? It works a treat.
I love that.
I defeat my own irrational thinking. And we all have irrational and intrusive thoughts. And sometimes they get in the way of us moving on with our life. Dentistry is just one of them, Ken.
Interesting. You're challenging that irrational belief with evidence that you pre-record, because it slips from mind when you're faced with that actuating event again, which is going back to it really keys into the ABC, doesn't it, of REBT. Lots of letters there, rational emotive behavioral therapy, which you spoke of a little bit earlier. But let's get straight in to theory with Rory.
Counselling Theory with Rory Lees Oakes.
One of the greatest books ever written about personal growth is The Road Less Travelled by M Scott Peck. I have to warn you, it's not an easy read, not because it's written in stilted academic language. It's hard to read because it tells us home truths that some may find uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. The book starts, as it means to go on, with the opening lines, "Life is difficult." This is a great truth, one of the greatest truths. It is a great truth because once we truly see this truth, we can transcend it. Once we truly know that life is difficult, once we truly understand and accept it, then life is no longer difficult, because once it is accepted, the fact that life is difficult no longer matters. M Scott Peck is of course reminding us of the lesson we should have learned as children, that life is seldom fair. It's a theme that comes up in a lot of self-help and therapy books, and it's also a position in philosophy known as stoicism. Stoicism teaches us to develop self-control on what we would now term as mental toughness as a way of overcoming destructive, irrational emotions. This is best summed up in a quotation from Epictetus, a first-century Stoic philosopher who reflected, "What really frightens and dismays us is not the external events themselves, but the way in which we think about them. It is not the things that disturb us, but our interpretation of their significance." In other words, humans have a tendency, when emotional, to think irrationally. It's a position that Albert Ellis, the founder of rational emotive behavioural therapy, the forerunner of cognitive behavioural therapy, explored in his 1962 book, Reason and Emotion in Psychotherapy. He listed 11 different statements of irrational thinking and believed that once people understood that their thinking was irrational, they were on their way to living a happier life. And I will read you this list taken from the book. The first, it is dire necessity for adult humans to be loved or approved by virtually every single person in their community. Secondly, one absolutely must be competent, adequate and achieving in all important respects, or else one is inadequate and a worthless person. 3. People absolutely must act considerately and fairly, and they are damnable villains if they do not. They are bad acts. It is awful and terrible when things are not the way one would very much like them to be. Emotional disturbance is mainly externally caused, and people have little or no ability to increase or decrease their dysfunctional feelings and behaviour. 6. If something is or may be dangerous or fearsome, then one should be constantly and excessively concerned about it and should keep dwelling on the possibility of it occurring. 7. One cannot and must not face life's responsibilities and difficulties. It is easier to avoid them. 8. One must be quite dependent on others and need them, and you cannot mainly run one's own life. 9. One's past history is all-important determiner of one's present behaviour, and because someone once strongly affected one's life or something affected your life, it should do it indefinitely and have a similar effect. 10. Other people's disturbances are horrible and one must feel upset about them. And finally, 11. There is invariably a right, precise and perfect solution to human problems, and it's awful if this perfect solution is not found. Through the years, I've come across many people who present with these thoughts. I have found that if I gently challenge them, they too can see the irrationality of them. So if these are classed as irrational thoughts, what are intrusive thoughts? Well, let me share with you an interaction I had with one of my students a few years ago. I was explaining to my class about the nature of intrusive thinking and used myself as an example that about 1 in 4 of us experience them. I shared a story about driving home from college along the motorway when my mind flashed up, "Why don't you drive into the oncoming traffic?" For what felt like a good few minutes, my mind played with the chaos that would ensue as drivers on the opposite carriageway flashed their lights and honked their horns as they tried to avoid a fatal pile-up and certain death. At that point, a student let out a gasp. I thought initially that she may reflect she was being taught by a sociopath with a death wish. However, her response was a sigh of relief. She had also experienced intrusive thoughts and began to believe that, in fact, she was a sociopath with a death wish. A few weeks later, on the way to work, I was listening to Radio 4's All in the Mind, a programme that discusses a wide range of issues connected to mental health. They were interviewing an emeritus professor of psychiatry on the subject of intrusive thoughts. The interviewer asked him for an example, and I laughed out loud at his response. "Well," he said, "I came to the studio today on the Tube, which is like the London Underground, and I was waiting on the platform and noticed a woman stood in front of me. My mind flashed up, push her in front of the train." There was a pause before the interviewer inquired, "And what happened?" The professor went on to explain that thinking and acting on thoughts are two different things. And no, he didn't murder a commuter before appearing on a live radio programme. And that's the difference. If, like me, you have the odd intrusive thought, don't be so quick to push it out of your brain, because the more you do, the more likely it will stick around. Want an example? A pink elephant on a bicycle. I wonder how long it will take you for you to lose that image. So the next time you have the odd intrusive thought, just remember that it's all part of being human and is normal, whatever that is.
As always, thank you very much, Rory. And it is amazing that, I guess, as humans, we are subject to having many irrational thoughts. And it's interesting that they're out of our awareness. They can be totally irrational, yet unless they are disputed by evidence, we don't see them. And even when we do see them, we kind of like to cling on to them.
Yeah, absolutely. They become kind of like totems that become our truths. And it's only when you take action. And actually, and this is the basis of cognitive behavioural therapies, where you physically take action and check your perception against reality, that you realise that actually your perception isn't reality. And just to go back to my video, when I play my video, I can't argue against myself, Ken.
Yeah. So moving away from theory with Rory, we're going straight into person-centered business and continuing our journey of what does it look like after graduation if we do choose to go and start a business, being a counsellor or a psychotherapist. And part of that might be considering whether you need a website. And today, just touching on websites is part one of a number of, I don't know how many they're going to be, Rory. We'll see as we go on. There's going to be a few of these, but this is certainly part one. Just touching on, do you really need a website, and what are the different options that are out there, self-created and hosted, or alternatively getting a company to build that for you? So let's go and have a listen to Person-Centered Business.
Person-Centered Business with Kenneth Kelly.
Today I wanted to look at websites. Do you need one? How do you get one? How much should you be paying for one? And these are questions if you are looking at advertising your services as a counselor, as a psychotherapist. A website is a great place for people to meet you, to see who you are, to see what it is that you offer. It's an opportunity for them to get to know you, to see if they feel comfortable with your style and who you are. And then it gives them the opportunity to get in contact with you as well, that you can have various contact methods on your website. So I'm not going to go too deeply into that because I guess we all know what a website is. However, the two different kinds of websites, and it's really worth considering what it is that you want and how you see your practice going. So the first kind of website is usually low cost to free. And you don't have to look far online. If you go online, you can put in low cost website, free website, and you will find service providers such as Wix, such as Weebly, do-it-yourself website designs, templates that are offered by hosting companies such as GoDaddy, such as 123Reg, such as One-on-One Internet. They offer some kind of a really low-cost, do-it-yourself, almost pre-made template website where all you need to do is kind of put some pictures on there and a little description of what it is that you offer. And it can be very tempting to be drawn into that world of low cost to free. And at the end of the day, the website looks okay, the designs are lovely, and it's going to get your information out. However, there are some limitations in these free do-it-yourself or low-cost website design and template building companies. And you kind of tend to only run into the limitations once you've put in a whole pile of work and you've actually built the website. And then you find maybe that people are not contacting you because your website is not optimized to be found on Google. So having a website is one thing, and it doesn't matter how good your website is. If nobody ever sees it, then it is totally useless to you. So you need a website that is going to be seen. When people say, for instance, look for counselling or psychotherapy or the service that you offer within your area. So for mine, they might put in, I'm looking for a counsellor in Warrington. And I would hope that if somebody in my area was looking for a counsellor, then my website would come up. Else it would be not really worth me having a website at all. So that's I guess the first message is be careful that a lot of these template-based website design or low-cost entry website companies don't give you the ability to properly optimize your site to get it seen by Google. The other thing that they kind of limit you on is it's almost as if some of these companies can almost hold you for ransom. So you might have a great idea for your practice name or your website name. It's www.mypractice.com or whatever it is. And you go and you buy that domain name, and there's almost a feeling that if I buy my domain with company X, then I have to build my website with company X. And there are a lot of very cheap domain offer companies out there. So they offer domain names really cheaply. When you buy the domain, it's almost like you can't leave them. It's almost like you're locked in. So you have to use their web services to build your site. And if you try to leave, they make it very difficult for you to take your domain with you. So it is worth considering that when you're looking at your domain and the platform that you'd like to build your website on. So I've mentioned some of the do-it-yourself ones, and I'll go over them again. It's Wix, it's Weebly, and we'll put in some links for you. And of course, there are some domain and sellers and service providers such as GoDaddy, such as HostGator, such as 123reg, such as One-on-One Internet that will offer you the domain name and a easy to build template-based website. So just moving away from those lower cost options, there is a free option which is called WordPress, and there are two different flavors of WordPress, as it were. The one is WordPress.com and the other one is WordPress.org. So WordPress.com, you will be able to go and build a WordPress website. So WordPress is just a framework. It's a name that is given to a type of website which is highly customizable and really easy once you get to grips with the basics to build. It's basically like creating a Word document and putting some text on it and dragging some pictures in. It's really intuitive and really easy to work. So WordPress.com will allow you to go in and register a domain with them and start a simple WordPress site with them. But here again, when you're looking at WordPress.com, it can be restrictive, and you can find that you will kind of run into things that you might need that they may choose to then start charging you money for. So what looks free up front may not be free in the long run. However, WordPress.org is a platform where you can go and download the WordPress platform. You can download the software that WordPress is based on, and you can host that with anybody. So maybe you did take your hosting with GoDaddy or HostGator or 123reg. You can actually host a WordPress website on your server, the server space that you have with those linked to your domain name, and WordPress.org is absolutely free of charge. You can download and use their software. It is what is called open source software. It means anybody can use it for free. It is regularly updated, and it is fast becoming the industry standard. It is highly optimized. It is seen by Google. It is recognized by Google as a great framework to build a website on, and there are literally hundreds of thousands of different themes, and a different theme means you get a different look for your website. Some of them are free and some of them are paid for. So it's worth just having a think. I didn't want to go too deeply into all the very specifics, but I guess the question that you ask yourself at the end of the day is, what is it that you're in this for? So if you're in this to be a counselor, a psychotherapist, and to be there in the room with your client, maybe it's an idea to leave the website building to a professional, somebody who chooses to do that for a living in the same way as we choose to maybe counsel for a living. And if I had one recommendation when it comes to websites, I believe a website represents you, it represents who you are, it represents your practice. It is really important. It's a considered decision in your practice because it does represent you. It's very often the very first contact that a client may have with you is through your website. And I truly believe that putting that in the hands of a professional, and there are some people out there that build websites for really reasonable prices. I think that is a good investment, but there are some free options there. There is WordPress.org, there is WordPress.com, and I guess at the end of the day, it's for your consideration. And in next week's episode, I'm going to be kind of drilling down and looking at what kind of content we might put on our websites. I hope that this has been interested in just getting your thought juices flowing around what you may do if you do need a website.
Oh, Ken, I just always love listening to your webmaster wizardry. and Ken is the webmaster of counsellingtutor.com and a few other websites, and you really do know your stuff. And I totally agree that you should stick with what you're good at. I think that if you're a therapist, you can stick with that. And unless, like yourself, Ken, you're multifaceted and you happen to be a super duper therapist and a website wizard, I think it's best to get professional advice. You wouldn't want to be building your own extension, would you? I'm building my own practice room. I've never had bricks. I'd love my own practice room. I've got a trowel and some bricks and mortar. I'm just going to knock it up in the garden. It's a pathway to disaster, isn't it?
Oh, I hear you loud and clear. And I guess it's like a web designer going and doing reading a book on psychotherapy and then saying, let me have a bit of a dabble at counselling. There's a lot more to it than we actually see, and we wouldn't expect them to be able to do that. So why should we be able to build a website? But I mean, it does come down to choice at the end of the day. But moving on, we've got a really interesting question. This, of course, came from our Facebook group. Go onto Facebook, put in Counselling Tutor. We're right there at the top. Come and join in the conversation. And this question comes in. Tell me, please, when working with clients, any tips for keeping emotionally grounded when being confronted with personal triggers? We hear this again and again, Rory.
We do. We hear it all. We hear it all the time, and we experience it all the time as practitioners. You know, we will meet clients, and I have. I don't know if Ken has, but I'm sure he has, where they tell you a story, and you think, "Oh, that's a bit like what happened to me." And one of the things about training and why training is so rigorous, it should be rigorous. Training should be difficult, because if you cannot manage your own process, then you're not going to be in the client's frame of reference. If somebody tells you, say, for instance, just keeping in the theme of this podcast about having a fear of the dentist, if I was spending my time thinking about my own experience of it, I'm not doing the client any good at all. And I think what you're talking about there is what's referred to in training manuals and in psychotherapeutic jargon as parallel process, Ken.
Yeah, very, very much so. And if you're in practice, if you are in placement, then you should be having professional discussion within your learning institution where you're discussing elements of your practice. And this is an ideal place to talk about stuff that comes up for you. And various suggestions, of course, go to your supervisor. You will be supervised if you're in placement. So there's a great place to go. But it's also time to maybe consider your own therapy. And there are awarding bodies in the United Kingdom that part of your training is you need to evidence that you have done a certain amount of personal development and personal therapy. And the personal therapy is important because it is to personal therapy that you would take the stuff that's coming up for you. You're talking, when you said it, Rory said parallel process. It's when something that the client bring parallels something that has happened to you. And in that moment, you are no longer there with the client on their journey, standing with them, looking at their life. You're looking at your own and comparing it to what they're bringing. And that is, as you say, Rory quite rightly pointed out there, it ceases to be therapy.
ceases to be therapy. It's just two people sat in a room, one thinking about their frame of reference and someone desperately trying to project theirs in the hope that get some kind of closure. Yeah. And I think there's a couple of rules here. We all have stuff going on in our lives. I would laugh out loud on a regular basis when students would say to me, well, I guess you're all sorted out. I was like, I wish. I wish it was always sorted out. But I would say to them, we've all got things going on in our lives. And sometimes, who knows what happens on 3 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon when the phone goes and life changes for people. So what I would suggest is, if you've got something going on for you, you really, really have to think about, are you going to be able to work effectively with a client who's bringing the same issue? So here's an easy one for us: divorce. Someone's going through a divorce or separation. You're going through a divorce or separation. It's not completed. There's no Gestalt, which is a German word for completion. You're still in that process. Are you going to be able to work with someone who's going through the same thing? And my view would be, no, you're not. Absolutely, no, you're not. Same with bereavement. If someone's going through a bereavement, they need to think very, very, very carefully whether they can work with someone who's going through a bereavement. And my view would be, that's supervision. Yeah. If it's something that's quite long, protracted stuff that's going on for you, that's not closed, it's an open wound, your own personal therapy. And please, please, please use your personal process groups. That's what it's for. Yeah. The process groups there, instead of looking at everybody's shoes, it always happens in PD groups, everybody knows what shoes people wear. I know it's difficult, but try and bring it and try and get some support with it. And there's no shame, and I want people to really hear this loud and clear, there's no shame if you're working with a client and you find that you cannot drift out of your own frame of reference, of thinking of a way of respectfully referring them on.
Yeah, 100%. And I think when you're speaking about looking to self and your own self-process, part of the training, part of what you are expected to go through as a trainee counselor, psychotherapist, is the ability to look at self and to start noticing stuff within self. And I can share that after my mother passed away, and it was quite a sudden and unexpected death, I was very mindful for how I was in practice. And I found that when somebody was bringing loss or family or cancer into the therapy room, I was straight away into parallel process. And I couldn't help it. I was mindfully trying not to be. I didn't have a choice in this. This was just coming up for me. And I took that, I recognized that, so that's understanding self. I took that to supervision, and together with my supervisor, I decided to step out of practice for a while for the benefit of my clients and for me, for my own self-healing. And for me, it was over 6 months that I needed to step away from practice. And I was so grateful of that 6 months when I put my foot back in practice, because I came in renewed and refreshed. And it was looking to self where I saw it first. And I think that it's insightful of the person who even asked this question on the Facebook group, because they're asking it for a reason, because they have spotted something in self. Take it to personal therapy, take it to supervision, take it to professional discussion, as we've discussed, and of course, personal development group. Dare to speak it out loud.
Absolutely, Ken. And there's one further danger with not working with this, is that it'll make you worse. If you've not healed yourself from whatever's gone on in your life, and you're working with someone else with an open wound, you're very likely to do yourself more damage, because you'll be constantly comparing yourself against their progress. And there can't be anything worse than someone who goes through, say, a separation, and they say, well, I'm fine about it now. It wasn't a great relationship for a long time. I'm fine. Coming through the end of it, I'm fine. And yours is still an open wound. The temptation may be there to go, why aren't I getting over it? And then you become more self-absorbed, more kind of introverted into yourself, and before long, it can lead to great difficulties. And I always worry, Ken, when people say to me, about going for personal therapy. Well, I haven't got anything to discuss really. And sometimes you think, well, some of the things I've heard you say would give me a view maybe that you've got a lot to say, and that is why. Sometimes, that's why we ask students to have their own personal therapy. And it's amazing what happens with that, because people will go on and say, well, I don't think we've got anything to bring. And it's 1 or 2 sessions in, and they will say, oh, I didn't realize I had all this stuff.
Yeah.
So, it's essential. You've got to look after yourself. This is what it comes down to. Taking self-care. It's an ethical imperative.
And there's no better way to end this, Rory, because you're 100% right. This comes down to self-care at the end of the day, and self-care needs to come first, because without care of self, we're not able to be there and give of ourselves for our clients that come to entrust their pain, their anguish, their difficulties in life with us. Wow, what an episode! We've travelled today, haven't we? We've looked at modality. We had a look at irrational thoughts in theory with Rory. We've just kind of tipped on, took off the top of the iceberg there with websites, and of course looking at this as a professional discussion, and of course this topic that we've just been covering now about that being emotionally grounded, looking to self. It's been quite an episode. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And as always, as we come to the end of this episode, like the Sergeants on Hill Street Blues, I always say, hey, stay grounded and stay safe.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.